You want to know what the heartbeat of a mid-size airline looks like. It does not look like those smiling flight attendants on billboards. It looks like a windowless bunker in the city that smells like burnt popcorn, anxiety, and the metallic tang of a breakdown waiting to happen. It looks like me, Richard, staring at a wall of monitors at 4 in the morning, praying that the desing trucks actually show up. For 11 years, I have been the operations lead. My job is simple. I take the logistical nightmare of flying metal tubes full of entitled tourists across the country, and I make sure they do not crash or get stuck in a holding pattern until they run out of fuel. I am the invisible hand. I am the reason your luggage actually makes it to your destination. The system we use is called Skybridge. It is a patchwork monstrosity of code written in the late 90s by a guy who probably passed away from stress at his keyboard. It is held together by digital duct tape, prayers, and a series of legacy overrides that I, and only I, know how to navigate. You treat it right, you feed it the correct data codes, and it hums. You look at it sideways, or try to optimize it without asking permission, and it will ground a fleet instantly. This particular Tuesday started like every other Tuesday. I walked into the operations control center. I am 48 years old, and my back constantly reminds me of that fact. I sat down at my station, the command throne, which is actually just a standard office chair with a broken lumbar support. "Morning, sunshine," grunted heavyset Stan, my shift supervisor. "Do not start with me, Stan," I said, logging in. "How is the Eastern Seaboard?" I typed fast. Within 10 minutes, I had rerouted 3 flights out of the southern hub, bribed a gate agent with a promise of overtime, and manually patched the server lag before the automated system could trigger a panic. The warning light blinked off. Green, beautiful, soothing green. I was feeling good. I was feeling like a god of logistics. But you know what they say about the illusion of control. It is usually shattered by someone with a teeth-whitening addiction and a business degree they bought online. At 9 in the morning, the door to the center swung open. The air pressure in the room actually changed. The smell of burnt popcorn was instantly replaced by an aggressive cloud of expensive cologne. Standing there, looking like they just wandered off the set of a reality show, were Julian and Sierra. Julian is the owner's son. He is 32, has the jawline of a superhero and the business acumen of a ham sandwich. He spent the last 5 years on a spiritual sabbatical, which I assume is code for partying on a surfboard. Now, he was back wearing a suit that cost more than my annual rent, carrying a title that meant nothing, Chief Strategy Officer. Clinging to his arm was Sierra. Sierra was a lot. She was a former lifestyle influencer turned operations enthusiast. She was holding a tablet like it was a sacred text. "Julian," I said, not standing up, "to what do I owe the pleasure? The coffee machine is broken if that is what you are seeking." "Streamline," I repeated flatly. "Well, right now I am streamlining a massive commercial jet around a thunderstorm, so 300 people do not end up in danger. So, observe away. Just do not touch anything." Julian laughed. "Always a firecracker, Richard. But we are thinking maybe we can modernize that grit, make it scalable." He walked over to my bank of monitors, reaching out a manicured hand toward the screen displaying the raw code. "Do not," I snapped. He froze. "Relax, Richard. It is just data." He pulled his hand back, but his eyes narrowed. "We have a meeting at noon," Julian said. "Boardroom. Be there. We need to discuss the future." "I am busy keeping the present alive, Julian." They turned and left. The silence that followed was heavy. Stan looked at me over his burrito. "That felt like the beginning of the end, Stan," I said. "Better check your resume." I walked into the boardroom at noon sharp. The room was mostly glass overlooking the hangar. The founder, Old Man Caldwell, was not there. If Caldwell was absent, it meant the asylum was officially being run by the inmates. "Okay, team, let us pivot," Julian announced. "We have been analyzing the metrics with Sierra's new insights." Sierra started standing up and dimming the lights. A presentation projected onto the wall. "We feel that the airline is too reactive," Sierra said. "Operations is always putting out fires. We want to be proactive. We want to use artificial intelligence to predict the fires before they happen." "That is called weather forecasting," I said from the back. "We already do that." Sierra clicked to the next slide. Why do we have so many redundant routes to the secondary cities? The algorithm says we can cut 40% of those flights and just use larger planes on a consolidated schedule. Sierra, I said, keeping my voice dangerously low. We fly the smaller regional jets to those cities because the runway at the secondary airport cannot handle the weight of the larger commercial jets. If you consolidate to big planes, you have to fly into the main hub, which has a landing fee that is 3 times higher. You will lose $2 million a month in fees alone. Well, Julian said, that is just legacy thinking. You can negotiate the fees. I know a guy. You know a guy who controls the entire regional port authority? I asked. Is his name God? Enough, Julian snapped. The point is the operations department is bloated. We are going to implement a new dashboard, a seamless integration. We will not need specialists hoarding information. I saw what this was. This was about ego. They looked at me, a 48-year-old man in a polyester company polo, and they saw a relic. They hated that they needed me. So, they decided they did not. I tried to fight. I sent emails. I printed reports. I highlighted the catastrophic risks in bright yellow marker. The response from Julian was always the same. Thanks for the feedback, Richard. Let us stay positive and trust the process, accompanied by a smiley face, that passive-aggressive soulless punctuation mark. It was the digital equivalent of spitting in my face. Why are there so many codes? Cannot we just color code the flights? Pink for on time, red for late? Because Sierra, I gritted out, slamming a reroute command into the console. The codes tell us why it is late. Mechanical, crew, weather, air traffic control. A red color does not tell me if I need a mechanic or a priest. You are so negative, she sighed, blowing a bubble with her gum. You really need to work on your energy. It is affecting the team culture. The team culture? The team was terrified. Everyone was walking on eggshells. The break room, once a loud, raucous place where we traded war stories and gambled on arrival times, was now silent as a morgue. I went home that Friday and drank a glass of cheap wine straight from the bottle while watching infomercials for pressure washers. I felt dirty. Not the honest dirt of a hard day of work, but the slimy spiritual grime of watching something you built get dismantled by children playing with matches. I knew they were coming for me next. I could feel it in my bones like a storm front. I stopped arguing. That was the first sign, but they were too stupid to see it. At the Monday morning meeting, I just nodded. We are cutting the turnaround time in the southern hub to 20 minutes, Julian announced, seeking a fight. The old Richard would have screamed. 20 minutes is not enough time to deplane, clean, fuel, and board unless you are throwing passengers out the emergency exits while taxiing. The new Richard just sipped his coffee. Great initiative, Julian. Very bold. Sierra beamed. See, I told you he would get on board. It is all about mindset. Mindset. Yes, my mindset was currently focused on creating a localized apocalypse. I went back to my desk and started the digital house cleaning. The logic was sound. These are my personal productivity tools. If I am employed, they run. If I am not employed, well, access is revoked. It is a standard security protocol, right? You cannot have former employees accessing the system. I spent 3 days doing this. I worked late. Sierra stopped by once seeing me furiously typing. Wow, burning the midnight oil. Love the hustle, she chirped. Just documenting everything for the transition, I said. Not lying, making sure everything is in its right place. Perfect. We are bringing in the consultants next week to map the workflow. What was that? By Thursday, the trap was set. My legacy override was now the structural load-bearing wall of the entire operation, and the detonator was my employment status. But I needed one more thing, a paper trail, a document so thick it could stop a bullet and shield me from any claim of a breach of fiduciary duty or negligence. I dug up an old compliance agreement from several years ago. It was a dusty file regarding the intellectual property of custom tools. It basically stated that any code written by an employee specifically for personal workflow optimization remained the responsibility of that employee to maintain unless formally transferred to the technology department with a 60-day review period. It was a loophole meant to stop programmers from claiming ownership of the company website, but the wording was vague. Personal workflow optimization. My scripts were personal. They optimized my workflow. I printed it out. I signed it. I buried it in a stack of hiring onboarding documents I sent to human resources for the new interns. Nobody reads that paperwork. It was filed away in the basement of bureaucracy, rendering any future legal threats essentially void ab initio because they formally accepted my terms by processing the stack. The atmosphere in the center was getting weird. The new hires Julian brought in were useless. They were kids who thought logistics meant ordering food delivery on an application. One of them, a guy named Bryce, came up to me. "Hey, Richard, the system is throwing a dependency error on the fuel manifests." "Yeah, it says admin authorization required." "Oh, just hit bypass," I said. "I will authorize it later." They were already hitting the walls of the maze I built, but they were just climbing over them, assuming I would always be there to catch them on the other side. That Friday afternoon, the summons came. An automated calendar notification. Meeting with human resources and strategy. 3 in the afternoon, no subject line, no agenda. I knew what it was. It was the execution. I looked around the center one last time. I looked at the flickering screens, the gray carpet, Stan wiping mustard off his shirt. I felt a pang of sadness. I love this dump. I love the chaos. But you cannot save a house when the owners are dousing it in gasoline and handing you a match. I opened my desk drawer. I took out my personal hard drive, empty, because I wiped it. I took my framed photo of my dog, deceased much like my career. I took my stash of emergency headache medicine. I put them in my bag. I stood up. "Yeah, boss. If the routing server asks for a level 5 handshake tonight, do not force it. Just let it cycle." Stan looked at me confused. "Oh, okay. You going somewhere?" "Always do." I walked to the elevator. My heart was pounding, a heavy, dull thud against my ribs. It was not fear, it was the adrenaline of a soldier walking into an ambush he already knew was there. I checked my watch. Almost 3 in the afternoon. The first bank of flights, the Friday rush, was scheduled to push back from the gates at 4:30. Timing is everything in aviation. I smoothed my shirt. I put on my best customer service face. One that says I am listening while thinking about their downfall. "Have a seat, Richard," Julian said, gesturing to the chair. The chair was lower than theirs. Classic power move. I remained standing. "I prefer to stand, Julian. My back acts up when I sit near incompetence." Julian's jaw tightened. "Okay, let us make this quick. We have been reviewing the structural changes for the operations department." "What?" I asked, checking my watch. 3:05. "Synergy," I repeated. "Is that the word for firing the only person who knows how the server works?" "I am a mechanic," I snapped. "I fix the things you break, but please go on. Fire me. Say the words. Do not hide behind synergy. Be a big boy, Julian." Julian stood up, his face reddening. "You are terminated effective immediately for insubordination and failure to adapt to new company protocols." Brenda slid a folder across the desk. "We have prepared a severance package, 2 weeks of pay, a standard non-disclosure agreement. If you sign now, we will not contest unemployment." 2 weeks. 11 years of keeping their planes in the sky. 11 years of missed holidays and dinners eaten out of a vending machine, and they offered me 2 weeks. It was insulting. It was perfect. I did not look at the folder. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my identification badge. The plastic was cracked, the lanyard frayed. It had my face on it from a decade ago, looking hopeful. I did not recognize that man anymore. I tossed the badge onto the desk. It landed with a plastic clack right on top of Sierra's expensive tablet. "Keep the money," I said. "I do not want your severance, and I am not signing your non-disclosure agreement." Julian laughed. "You think we cannot run this place without you? We have the dashboard. We have the data." I looked at him. I looked deep into his empty trust fund eyes. "Julian, you have a dashboard that displays data I curate. You have a system that runs on logic I wrote. You think you bought a self-driving car? You did not. You bought a manual transmission, and you just fired the driver while going 80 miles per hour on the highway." I turned to the door. "Wait," Sierra said. "You need to hand over your passwords." "They are in the drawer," I lied, "written on a sticky note. Just like you like it." I opened the door. The hallway air felt cooler, cleaner. I stopped and looked back one last time. The server creates a temporary cache for the flight roster every 4 hours. It is due to refresh at 3:30. That is in 20 minutes. So when the cache clears, it looks for an active user authorization to rebuild the bridge to the mainframe. If it does not find one, well, it gets confused. We have an entire technology department, Julian scoffed. Get out. Tell your dad I said good luck, I said. My thumb hovered over the screen. I thought about the severance. I thought about Sierra's vibe shift. I thought about old man Caldwell letting his idiot son play God with my life. I pressed yes, status disconnected. I walked out of the building and into the sunlight. The air smelled like jet fuel and freedom. The clock started ticking. I walked in at 3:15. The place was empty, save for a couple of baggage handlers in the corner arguing about sports. Early day, Richard? Tony asked, wiping a glass with a rag that was arguably dirtier than the glass. Permanent vacation, Tony, I said, sliding onto a stool. Give me a grandiose amount of tequila, the cheap stuff. I want to feel it burn. Tony poured. I drank. I propped my phone up against the napkin holder. I did not have access to the internal system anymore, but I had something better. A public tracking application. I watched the little yellow plane icons moving across the map. 3:25. Everything looked normal. 3:30. The cache refreshed. Somewhere in the server room, a line of code was reaching out for my digital hand and grasping nothing but air. Back in the bar, I watched the application. 3:45. The southern flight suddenly changed status from on time to delayed, then a flight to the east coast delayed, then a flight to the northwest delayed. Here we go, I whispered, taking another shot. My phone buzzed, no number. I let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again and again. Then a text from Stan. Richard, what is happening? The system is locking us out of gate assignments. We have 2 planes taxiing to the same gate. Pilots are screaming. I did not reply. I took a sip of my beer. It is a terrible thing watching a disaster you engineered. It is also intoxicating. I imagined the pilots on the radio. Tower, we have no gate assignment, holding on the taxiway. Tower would reply, we show you at gate 4. Negative Tower, gate 4 is occupied by a massive competitor aircraft. Where do you want us? Wait. Our screen just went blank. The drift had begun. Without the routing logic, the automated system reverts to the default factory settings from 24 years ago. It does not know about the new terminal extension. It does not know about the runway construction. It just starts throwing planes into slots that do not exist physically, only digitally. You celebrating something? Tony asked, eyeing my grin. Retirement, Tony, I said. I am watching the sunset. It is 4 in the afternoon, Richard. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Julian. I stared at the name on the screen. I deleted the contact. Now it was just a number. I let it ring until it stopped. The bartender turned up the television volume. Breaking news, the anchor said. Reports of significant ground delays at major airports. Passengers are reporting confusion and cancellations. Apparent system-wide outage for a regional carrier. I raised my glass to the television. Cheers, Sierra, I whispered. Hope that proactive mindset is working out for you. I was on my 3rd tequila when the news showed a clip of the terminal. It was a sea of angry people. You know the look. Mothers with crying babies. Businessmen screaming at gate agents who make minimum wage. College kids sitting on their suitcases eating pretzels. It was pure chaos under fluorescent lighting. Back at headquarters, I imagined the scene was different. According to Stan, who was now live texting me the play-by-play like a war correspondent, old man Caldwell had arrived. Caldwell is an octogenarian, walks with a cane that looks like a weapon, and possesses a temper that could peel paint off a wall. He did not just walk into the boardroom, he stormed in. What in the unholy hell is going on? Caldwell reportedly roared. Julian was sweating through his expensive suit. It is a glitch, Dad. A cyber attack. We are being hacked. Sierra is overseeing it, Julian stammered. We let him go, Julian whispered. You what? He was not a culture fit, Sierra wailed. He was negative. He was the only one who knew how to run the airline, Caldwell screamed. Get him on the phone. He is not answering, Julian said. Stan told me later that he found it. He handed it to Caldwell. Inside was a single sheet of paper. On it, I had printed the system architecture map. In the middle, circled in red marker, was a node labeled User Richard, Personal Script Directory. And below that, a copy of the compliance agreement I signed years ago. The one that said personal tools are the responsibility of the employee. And a sticky note. Clause 4, Section B. Upon termination, all personal workflow optimizations are automatically purged from the active server. Liability for system dependencies on personal tools rests with the administrator who authorizes the termination. In legal terms, the company committed a breach of fiduciary duty to its own shareholders by firing me without securing the digital assets first. Caldwell read it. He looked at Julian. "You fired him," Caldwell said, his voice quiet. "And you did not check for dependencies?" "He did not tell us," Julian whined. "It was your job to know what the system was." Caldwell threw the paper at him. "You just purged the operating system because you did not like the wallpaper. Fix it." Caldwell barked at the technology guys. "We cannot," the lead technician said. "The scripts are gone. We have to rebuild the routing logic from scratch. We have to go manual." Manual. It slows everything down by 80%. The airline was effectively dead in the water. And me? I ordered some mozzarella sticks. They were delicious, then the big one. Caller identification, Caldwell Sr. I stared at the phone. I respected Caldwell. He was a difficult man, but he was a competent one. He built the company. He knew the grit. But he also let his idiot son treat me like garbage. He stepped aside and let the vibe shift happen because he wanted to retire to a sunny state and play golf. He was complicit. I let it ring 3 times, then I picked up. "Hello, Richard." Caldwell's voice sounded old, tired. "It's a complete disaster down here. I noticed," I said. "The news says you guys are breaking records for cancellations." "Cut the nonsense." "Richard, the kid screwed up." "I know it, you know it, but you are hurting the airline. You are hurting the brand." "I did not hurt anything, sir. I was fired. I left." The system did exactly what it was programmed to do: protect its security integrity. This was it, the victory lap. I could walk back in there, save the day, be the hero. I could get a raise. I could have Julian crying in the parking lot. It was tempting. Heavens, it was tempting. The fixer in me was screaming to go press the buttons and make the red lights turn green. But then I thought about the last 2 weeks. I thought about the streamlining. I thought about the disrespect. If I went back, nothing would really change. Caldwell would eventually pass away. Julian would eventually inherit the company again. And I would just be the janitor cleaning up their mess until I dropped dead of a stress-induced illness. "Name your number, Richard." 200,000? 250,000? "It is not about the money," I said, swirling my drink. "It is about the liability. You see, if I come back now and fix it, I am admitting that I sabotaged it. I am admitting that the system was dependent on me in a way that was negligent. Lawyers would have a field day. I will sign a waiver." "No," I said firmly. "The bridge is burned, Caldwell. You let them light the match. You have to sit in the ashes." "You should have thought about that before you replaced your structural engineer with an influencer," I said. "Goodbye, Mr. Caldwell." I hung up. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not guilt. It was lightness. For the first time in 11 years, the planes were not my problem. I paid my tab. "I feel different, Tony. I feel streamlined." I took a rideshare home. The driver was listening to the radio. Airline stocks plunging in after hours trading as operations at the regional carrier grind to a halt. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. The silence was beautiful. Saturday morning, I slept in until 10. That has not happened in decades. I made coffee, good coffee from beans, not the powdered despair we had at the office. I sat on my porch and opened my laptop. My inbox was a disaster zone. 34 emails from Julian, 12 from Human Resources, 3 from Legal threatening to sue me. Good luck with that. I had the compliance document. I marked them all as spam. Within 10 minutes, I had 5 direct messages. Recruiters are like sharks. They smell blood in the water. But one message stood out. It was from Ian Lynn. Ian is the vice president of operations at our biggest rival. They fly the same routes, use the same airports, but they charge $50 more a ticket because they pretend to be fancy. Message: Richard saw the news, assuming the meltdown is related to your availability. We have been trying to crack their routing efficiency for years. If you are free, I would love to buy you lunch today. Name the place. I smiled. They had been trying to poach me for years, but I was loyal. I was stupidly, blindly loyal to Caldwell. Loyalty is a currency that depreciates the longer you hold it, I replied. Steakhouse downtown, noon. Bring a contract. Richard, he said, shaking my hand, you look rested. Unemployment suits me, I said. So Ian said, cutting into his ribeye. What happened? I fired the pilot and tried to fly the plane with a tablet, I said. Ian laughed. Classic Julian and the Fiancee. Ouch. Well, their loss is frankly a catastrophic gain for anyone else. Look, Richard, we know you built their routing logic. We know it is better than ours. We want you to come build it for us. I cannot give you their code, I said. That is intellectual property. He slid a piece of paper across the table. The number on it made my eyebrows hit my hairline. It was triple my salary at my previous employer. Triple. I looked at the contract, looked at the number. I thought about Julian sweating in the boardroom, trying to figure out why the planes would not move. I picked up the pen. One condition, I said. I want full autonomy. If I say a system needs to be fixed, it gets fixed. No committees, no vibe shifts. Done, Ian said. I signed. Welcome to the dark side, Ian grinned. Monday morning, I was logged into the new servers. Their system was a mess, clunky, bloated code, but it was fixable. I was already rewriting their dispatch protocols. It was like surgery, clean, precise. On the television, a news channel was broadcasting a live press conference from their headquarters. Julian was at the podium. He looked like he had not slept in 3 days. His tie was crooked. Sierra was nowhere to be seen. We are working around the clock to resolve the technical difficulties, Julian stammered into the microphone. We have brought in top experts, Mr. Caldwell, a reporter shouted. Is it true that the outage was caused by the firing of your operations lead? Julian flinched. That is an internal personnel matter. And what about the reports? The reporter continued. That your former lead is now consulting for your rival. Is that why their on-time performance jumped 5% this morning while yours is at 0? Julian froze. I have no comment on that, I replied. Get out, Stan. Send your resume to Ian Lynn. I will put in a word. I closed my laptop. I did not feel like a hero. Heroes saved the burning building. I felt like something else. I felt like a force of nature. I was the gravity that kept the planes up, and I was the gravity that brought them down. They treated me like a mechanic. They forgot that the mechanic is the only one who knows how to cut the brake lines without leaving a trace. I walked to my window. I live under the flight path of the airport. A plane roared overhead. It was one of our competitors' jets. It was on time. It was climbing steep and fast, cutting through the clouds. I raised my coffee mug to it. Fly safe, I said. Julian lost his job a week later. The airline was sold for parts 6 months after that. Sierra started a podcast about overcoming toxic workplaces. Me, I am still consulting. I make more money in a month than I used to make in a year. I bought a boat. I named it the Override. Sometimes when I am drinking alone and listening to the hum of the servers, I miss the chaos of the operations center. I miss the smell of burnt popcorn. But then I check my bank account, and I remember competence is expensive, disrespect is unaffordable, and revenge is just efficient routing.